My name's Tom Gale. Today I'm talking with Jonathan Bein, who's a senior partner with Real Results Marketing. Jonathan most recently contributed a two-part article to Modern Distribution Management based on an extensive industry survey he did in partnership with MDM, and the topic of that was the marketing imperative for wholesale distributors. And today we're going to be talking about distributor marketing best practices, and particularly the three areas of segmentation, positioning, and marketing channel selection. With that, Jonathan, welcome.
Tom, thanks for having me on the show.
So tell us a little bit about Real Results Marketing and how you really came to focus on wholesale distribution.
Real Results Marketing has been doing B2B marketing consulting for a number of years, really with a distributor specialty. We've ended up doing a lot of work in that space because of the background of our people. What we saw in the last couple of years is a significant opportunity to really help the distribution industry even more. And it came across to us in working with two clients, both large distributors, and we noticed a couple things in common. One was they had no e-commerce platform, and these are $800 million and billion-dollar companies. They also had no catalog. They also had no telesales. So they had, obviously, branches, but they were doing very little in terms of direct response marketing, other types of marketing that we think are key for distributor success. When we saw that example, we said, gosh, if an $800 million distributor and a billion-dollar distributor have these needs, there must be many other companies in the distribution space that have these needs. So we are focused exclusively on the distribution and reseller industry, working with companies of all sizes.
Part of the survey that you did and the subsequent articles that you wrote focused on some of the differentiation in terms of how distributors approach marketing. And I know two of the things that came out were that traditionally distributors have really focused on both outside sales and the inside sales functions as the primary marketing vehicles. Can you talk a little bit more about what the study really showed?
Absolutely. So our premise for the study was that at this point in the industry, at this point in the maturity of the industry, there is going to be a little bit of value to be gained from operational improvements. However, that has been going on for a number of years, and the results there will be incremental. The big opportunity is for distributors to really develop more meaningful multi-channel marketing capabilities. And I think one of the things that the study showed is that the companies that have done that end up being much more significant companies than the companies that only have one or two marketing channels. We think that for some sectors, the development of this multi-channel marketing capability will be the difference between leadership and being a follower in that sector. We think there are other sectors where the need is more dire. It will be the difference between surviving and not surviving.
So let's talk about segmentation. It would seem fairly straightforward to properly segment the market and analyze what's going on and then build some marketing plans around that. What are you doing differently in this area?
Let me give an example that I think will illustrate what we're doing differently and how it plays out. If you ask an executive at a distributor, what are your best market segments? What do your best customers look like? What's your best customer profile? The executives will have a ready answer, every one of them. That answer usually shows something different than what the data shows. We noticed this working with an HVAC distributor, and we looked at about 1 million different transactions they had. We analyzed it. We got firmographic data, and they said their best segments are HVAC contractors and electrical contractors, which would be a typical response for somebody in the HVAC space. When we looked at the data, we saw that both of those were high volume year over year. However, the electrical segment was actually a negative growth year over year, whereas the HVAC segment was positive growth year over year, and actually pretty steep positive growth. Even more important, there was a segment that they missed that was growing at 40% year over year. Obviously, it wasn't as large as these other segments. So this dynamic of what is your best customer profile plays out in almost every situation we've been in. You ask one thing, you look at the data tells you another. And the reason is that most distributors, when they're doing segmentation, will do something where it breaks it down by national account or contractor or institutional customers, or maybe they'll break down their customers by MRO or OEM or geographic. But what we do differently that I think is relevant is we look at the firmographic side of things. So we look at SIC, we look at revenue, we look at the number of employees the customer has. One variable that we've started looking at recently that turns out to have tremendous predictive power is when the customer was incorporated, the age of the customer. Let me give one example that relates to that I think illustrates the power of age. One analysis that we did recently, we looked at the age of the distributor's customers, and we found that customers that were incorporated after 2005 were the lowest volume, lowest growth segment that they had. We looked at customers that were formed between 2000 and 2005. That was their best segment in terms of both growth and in volume. And we've seen this age variable be very, very strong as a predictor for other customers.
It would make sense at one level that the older a customer, the longer it's been around, it's a much larger size company, and so probably it's going to be more stable and more predictive in terms of an ongoing revenue stream. Is that what's going on here?
I would say for large accounts, that's roughly what's going on. So if you look at a national account, they tend to be older. I mean, the multi-billion-dollar companies are by definition older. But when you look at the contractor segment, it really does vary. With this one HVAC example that we gave, it turns out that HVAC contractors that were formed in the 90s were better than HVAC contractors that were formed after 2000. By contrast, electrical contractors formed during the 80s were better than any of the others. So it really does vary by segment, but I think generally the large companies are obviously going to be older.
Can you give an example of once you pull out that kind of qualitative information that maybe a lot of people aren't looking at, how does that play into an execution of a marketing plan?
Well, there's a couple ways that it plays out. First is in customer selection. The example I gave a couple of moments ago about the segment that was growing at 40% year over year, you can bet that that distributor went out and got more contacts from that segment based on firmographic data. The other thing is that once you have clearer segmentation, you can define specific programs for those segments. And really, even before you do that, understanding what happens behaviorally is important as well as a basis for segmentation. Simple things like what do they buy? And that could mean looking at individual products. It could mean looking at the market basket, looking at how often they buy. So the large companies tend to have a more frequent buying pattern than the smaller contractors. Your expectations about lifetime value for a contractor are going to be different than your expectations about lifetime value for a national account. Looking at channel is also another interesting way to segment behaviorally what the customers are doing. It may turn out that some customers buy significantly over the web, or they might use punch-out for the very largest accounts, whereas the smaller customers may come to the branch. So you can define much more meaningful programs once you've got this clear segmentation. And I think the result is both better marketing efficiency and better marketing effectiveness in terms of the response rate for campaigns.